to think about if you're not already. This is some of the information on our sites, if you don't know it. And I put this on here as a screenshot just to show how much information that we track and take care of. So pictures of sites, there's like comments and notes if you click on that to give you details about what they're like. So if you think about all the detail there, and there's like thousands of sites, how much information that is and how many places there are across our coast. And it's all the way from where you guys are in the South Islands all the way up to the top, the border. I think it's all the way up the Inside Passage, actually, all the way to Prince Rupert. The vision of BC Marine Trails is to link our coast all along that coastline and to make sure that we can protect accessibility to all those great sites that we all love to enjoy. These are some of our existing trails right now. There's 3 official sites. What is a marine trail? It's a network of the sites. So there might be others here on the map in the Gulf Islands Marine Trail that you might know of. But these are the ones where we've linked together a great way for somebody to plan a trip. Maybe you're new, don't know where all the spots are. Allows you like a little destination to work through. So we have one down in Gulf Islands. There's also one documented in SISKA area. So I've spent some time there last year, and it's really beautiful how close you can be to the city. And you could even, you know, walk off from Horseshoe Bay Ferry and be able to paddle that whole Howe Sound area. And there's some really neat sites there. So different with the big, deep, steep cliffs everywhere. There's the Salish Sea Trail. It's a little more challenging, bringing you from Vancouver to Victoria. And then what we're really excited about right now is working on the Cape Scott Marine Trail. So that's building it from Port Hardy around to Quatsino. And we're partnering with First Nations, with BC Parks, and supporting the identification of marine-friendly sites and helping to identify the right locations, and then also building the site plans for how we can operate. When we're looking at trails, I thought this might be interesting too, to understand what we're looking for. We've moved away from trying to have formal sites where we have actual, you know, ownership of it, or with BC Parks and like a formal agreement to care for it, because there's just too many sites and not enough people. So we've really working towards a process where it's an informal site, where we do our best to monitor as best we can, to take care of it, identify issues, and help to resolve them. So it's really looking at it 3 ways in the trails. There's how do we take care of the sites, and can we manage it all? And safety is another key area. So I'll talk about it shortly, but just what can an average paddler do, and what's safe for you to travel before you make a stop? So we wouldn't put when it's obviously there are sites that have, you know, big distances between them, but if we're going to designate it as a trail, there needs to be an ability to stop within 8 nautical miles, and 5 is preferred. And we also engage the First Nations, because hey, we're just all here on their land, and making sure that we're respecting what they need and what they want. That's really one of the areas we're most proud of. I'll spend a couple of slides talking about it, because I think it's relatively new, and it's also really important that we identify conflicts and we understand what is important to them. So for example, we won't put a site on if we don't have permission. So even a common site that we know people stop at, we know people camp at, but if there is any kind of conflict there with the First Nation, we'll pull it off our site so that we're not promoting it. Blackberry Point is a good example of that. You won't see that on the map right now, but we're working with them, as are others, to try to make sure we can get a formal agreement and allow access, because it's such a beautiful spot, and a critical one too, like from a safety standpoint when you're in that area. So there's a couple of things I think it's good to share and understand what we're doing. We actually do have a contract employee that does help us with this. He's a liaison and he's a public outreach worker that establishes the relationships and helps work through as a negotiate some of the areas that we want to be a part of. We're working with about 15 nations all the time, trying to make sure that we're all on the same page and that they understand how we're trying to support their needs, as well as make sure we have access for kayakers and anyone else actually that's out on the water. I mentioned the marine safety earlier. So the 8 nautical miles is what is our mandate to find between campsites. We feel that's a safe distance that an average paddler can travel. 5 nautical miles to a place where you could pull out if the wind comes up or the waves come up too quickly. Public access is also critical so that we know people allowing us to be there. And we have a big our trail development committee is one of the biggest ones within BC Marine Trails, and they meet regularly to assess areas, assess sites, and update them. We have managers set up, regional managers set up, all volunteer, that just help us keep track of all the areas as well. And the other thing we do have as a safety precaution is people trained to assess danger trees, so that if we are going up to a site, if we do get a site condition report that says there's a tree there that looks a little iffy and it may fall on somebody when they're sleeping under a site, we want to identify those right away and be able to help to take care of that. And this is a way that you can help us. We have on our website, we call it a site condition report, and it allows you to download a form and either fill it out, print it out, send it back, or just we now have the capability to input it directly online. It's under our Caring for Our Trails tab, and it's super helpful. We're really focusing on this in the next year to try to get more people to report on what's happening out there so that we can identify issues and try to find support to take action on them. We also have another level of site assessment, which is a bit more detailed and is more about finding out whether a site has the right attributes for putting on the map as like a specific site. We do have a short training. It's like maybe an hour or so online to like just talk through what all the different fields are and how to fill them out. And it's kind of fun, so at some point, most of us have traveled to a lot of different places, and it sort of gives you like a little extra thing to do when you're out there. If you're not the kind of person that can just sit on the beach and read a book, doing site assessments and site condition reporting might be kind of a fun thing to add to your regular travels. And as I mentioned before, one of the areas we're really working on is out the North Island. So Campbell River to Port Hardy is one of the areas that we're developing new sites, and really would love to have more site reports filled out if you have the time to do it. Caring for our coast, I think, is one thing that helps draw us all together. It's a huge, diverse shoreline that we have, and just how do we take care of this so that it's there for all of other people to enjoy? With more people getting involved in kayaking and getting out there camping, it's even more important, I think, that we start to talk about how to behave out there. What is the things that will protect the land around us? So as part of that, I'll talk about it in more detail in a second, but we've created a Marine Code of Conduct, just helping to identify ways to behave out in the marine environment that reduces our impact. We have an environmental care program that is in process of being set up. So taking that almost one step further in how we protect species, how we look at the ecologies within the different areas. There's so many different climates along our coast, and just understanding them all and having a handbook is, I think, helpful for all of us. We do some of our own organized events, and we also, to care for the sites, have a number of clubs who actually formally have agreed to take care of certain areas and certain sites. And where you guys are now, it's a lot of provincial and federal parks, so there's not that much to do, but that doesn't, you know, take away. You could still look after sites somewhere else if there's areas that you're regularly going to. Some of the things that we do as BC Marine Trails is clean up on Gerald Island. I know some of you, thank you very much, have been involved up there. I heard Jim being mentioned earlier. I met him in this past fall when we did a cleanup out there. The big thing we're trying to get rid of there is that English ivy. You know, it looks so pretty and it covers up that ground so nicely, but it just takes over and it's really wreaks havoc in our coastal environment. So it's a project where we go out once or twice a year and try to really cut that back. And it's really rewarding because it's easy, you know, you can take out a lot of stuff and really see the impact that you make in a short period of time. We have another one and we have a new one coming up. Oh, Jean, I forget the dates. It's May, is it? Can you shout it out?
No, for
listening.
Gerald Island?
Yeah, Gerald Island. What are the dates? I forgot to write it down.
Our invasive species project is hopefully going to be approved by BC Parks to run between April 10 and 17. And we welcome people either for the day, for any period of time they wish to camp, as long as we can maintain a small enough footprint in terms of number of campers that will be managed to make sure it's distributed over the time. And yeah, it's a wonderful way to get out and enjoy looking after something. I mean, it's not just English ivy, it's a number of different invasive species. And Gerald Island and all of the Gulf Islands up in the central Vancouver Island area are very unique in terms of the flora that exists there and the sometimes blue or even red listed plants. And so it really this used to be one of our sailing marks when I was racing sailboats. And, you know, it just has such a deep attachment for me. All of those islands off of Nanoose and, well, between Nanoose and Nanaimo, I mean, they're just beautiful. And they are a rare Gary Oak ecosystem in many instances. And Gerald is a unique coastal bluff system. So it's really fascinating because I learn a lot about plants that I didn't know before. And Jim Lamb from SISKA has been a huge help last year and has been advocating to extend the efforts over 2 weekends. So that's what we're doing this year so that people who work can participate. So I'll shut up now. But it would be lovely.
No, thank you. It's coming up soon and we need volunteers. So that is great to have because we need those volunteers and we're sending out a message to you really shortly to formalize that. We also do coastal plastics cleanups along the coast. I know, again, a number of you have been part of that and thanks so much for joining us. We've recently started to partner with a group called Rugged Coast and they have boats so they can help us pick up the garbage. And it's been a really great partnership the last year and we're looking to partner with them in a few this year. The one that we're planning tentatively right now is out at the South Brooks in August. And again, we'll send out some more information as it gets closer.
2 to 10, August 2 to 10.
That's great. Thanks, Jean. And then we also have opportunities for clubs that get involved. So the Comox Valley Paddlers, they look after the Discovery Island sites that we're in process of developing. And they're definitely informal sites that are already there, but we're looking to improve them and analyze the environmental impact that we have and create a site plan that just helps them stay in their most natural state as they can. We also have SCA BC who maintains the House Sound sites and Couch and Paddlers to Musgrave Point. And they were just there last week. Actually, I was just reading a report earlier today about some of their challenges there and what they're looking to do to maintain it. So it's really great where we can get interaction between the clubs and BC Marine Trails because it just adds more people to help out. I wanted to take just a minute to talk about our code of conduct because it's a big project that BC Marine Trails has taken on. It's been 4 years in development. There's been public consultations. We've gone through peer reviews and endless meetings, even within our own organization, to just get that wording right and to be able to develop a set of behaviors and how to be out in a marine environment. So you know, you often find people talking about leave no trace as a way of camping and behaving in the outdoors, but that was really developed to be a land-based set of principles, and it doesn't always apply on the water. And that's why we took this on and wanted to specifically focus on the marine environment.
Sorry, Gina, you're echoing.
Yeah, I think somebody might have their
Somebody has their mic on. Please shut your mics off.
Ellen can mute everybody and then bring Gina back in.
Yep.
There, that sounds better. So yeah, this code of conduct is something we've recently approved, and we will be sending out messages to all the clubs and asking for you to review it and hopefully adopt it into some of your documentation or some of parts of it. I'm sure you're already doing around some of your trip best practices and what you're doing when you're doing your club trips and helping us spread the word about how to really protect our marine environment. It's really detailed, so I won't read it all here, but please go to our website in the bcmarinetrails.org, and it's I think under stewardship to be able to see this. There's a long version and a short version, and we're working on printing some brochures and different things that we can include. So just started the communication plan, so you'll hear about it more and more. Oh, wrong button, I'm stuck. As I mentioned, there's also an environmental care program and identifying the species that are endangered. We're looking at all the different climate zones and really trying to identify that, make people aware of how we do impact the environment around us and what we can do to keep it at its best, to protect it. Here's just a couple of examples of species that are included within that document. They're all ones that we see on a regular basis when we're paddling in those South Islands. So think it's the Gulf Islands or all the way up the coast. And it's just, I think, a great way to identify and recognize what it is. You know, if they're flying away, if, you know, you have birds on the water that are a migratory species, you know, if we scare them away and we paddle too close, that's just an extra bit of energy that they're having to use up on their long trip from north to south. So I think this book will, or the handbook will really detail the ones that are at the most risk to avoid and just the behaviors that are cause risk to their protection. The other area is habitat. So there'll be lots of stuff, different flora and fauna, but I thought eelgrass was a good example for the Gulf Islands because that's what we see on so many of those beautiful beaches that you have down there. And it's something, you know, you don't really think about. We hear a lot about how you can imagine how the anchors can affect this from a sailboat, but even a heavy loaded kayak can damage the eelgrass. And there's little things you can do. I mean, avoiding it obviously would be the best choice, but if you can't, just use a different route in and out so that we're only putting the pressure on it in one place, you know, spread out a little bit so that you're not all impacting one specific area. So these are some of the, you know, the documents that we're trying to develop and make people, to educate people and make them aware of things they can do. This is the last slide. But I wanted to put up here just ways that you can all get involved. So as I mentioned at the beginning, become a member. You know, it doesn't seem like much, but those membership fees are really helpful in supporting our organization. We have only 2 paid staff one administrator who helps keep us all on track, and the First Nations liaison, and they're both part-time, and everything else is all volunteer work. So anything that all our dues go into supporting us, building out sites, doing all these assessments. For example, when we go to Gerald Island, all the tools that can be supplied, and we do lots of grants as well, but membership is a great way to get involved and support us. Filling out site condition reports as you're on a trip, even on a day paddle. I know you do a lot of day paddling in your group, and even, if you come across a site where a fire's been set out, let us know, because we really want to keep track of things like fire pits, danger trees, as I mentioned earlier, any big garbage that you can't take out yourselves. If we know about that, we can help to arrange cleanup of that. If you're really into what is out there and helping find more information about the sites, then join us for the site assessment. And most importantly, have a look at that code of conduct and see if you can adopt that into your club guidelines, because I think it's a great way to really make sure that we're protecting this beautiful place that we have for the future. And you can always donate. We are a not registered nonprofit, so if you're looking for a tax receipt for the end of the year, definitely you can also donate and help us out. And as a club, we're also looking more and more, as Fred mentioned at the beginning there, Fred and Lynn have been joining us on some cross-club discussions that we've been starting, and just to improve the communication between clubs across the province. We are a provincial-wide organization, so our awareness of what's happening out there, and we think we can help share information between clubs, and use some of your excellent people to get involved in some of the maintenance that we need done, stewardship that needs to happen. We have a high level understanding now. Jean's been working really hard with the BC Marine Debris Working Group, and there's a large number of organizations as a part of that, and we can get help now when we want to do a cleanup. And if your club wants to initiate a cleanup on a West Coast site, we may be able to help coordinate the garbage pickup or put you in touch with other people in that area. It's just a way to communicate more and be able to protect these great area that we live in and keep these sites open for people for years to come. So we'd love to get you more involved, and are here to answer any questions or give you any information that you might need. That's all I have. Thank you very much for your time. Is there any questions that you have?
Okay, if you do have questions, just unmute yourself and go ahead.
Sorry, can you say that again? I turned my volume down from when we were having that echo.
Oh, I just said if people have questions to go ahead and unmute themselves and go ahead and ask you the question. Okay, and if not, I think that you can always direct your questions to Gina. And Gina, would you provide an email address maybe in the chat?
Sure.
And
I'll do that right
probably
now.
also know Jean, and Fred is another person who's connected with Marine Trails for SISKA, as well as Jean. And so there's lots of avenues that you can follow up to get involved.
Yeah, I believe Fred is your club rep, is he not?
Yep.
Yeah.
Good job, Fred. Great job.
Thanks. I'd like to add a little advertisement at the end of this. First, I want to thank Gina and Jean for a really good presentation. Gave a very good overview of what the organization's all about. There are a couple of open positions for regional managers. And if there are any SISKA members who are thinking about considering a position like that, it's a volunteer position, just give me a shout and I can talk to you about the position and send you the job description for it. So if you're interested, please let me know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gina, very much. Jean and Fred, thank you. BC
Yeah,
Marine
thank
Trails,
you.
I'm a big supporter. It's been very, very helpful to me and my paddling friends as we've traveled up and down the coast these last many years. So we certainly want to return the favor to the environment and to the organization. So I hope SISKA, I hope a number of you will find ways to get involved, and we'll have some more discussions about how we might look at adopting some of the programs that have been developed through Marine Trails and the Cross Club discussions. So thank you very much. Now, before we move on, and we're moving on to listen to Morley Eldridge, our resident paddling archaeologist. I dubbed him. I don't know if you go by that normally, Morley, but that seemed like a good one. Before we get there and listen to Morley's presentation, we have, for the last few meetings, we've had a prize award. And so Debbie and Roger are tasked with coming up with a prize to be drawn, and they'd like to do that about now. Over to Debbie.
So
with the button, I guess.
Okay, I pushed the button and the winner is Daryl McCartney.
Oh, I think Daryl's on the call.
Exactly. I went through until I found somebody that was on the call.
Well done. Daryl, are you there?
So Roger?
Hey, Daryl, you want to move up front and center?
Say something.
I just did.
No, Daryl should say something.
I am here.
Okay, so what you have won is one boater kit, which is there, an emergency flashlight, one of those emergency blankets. It includes a paddle leash and a headlight.
Oh, that's
So-
great. Thank you.
But wait, we got a problem. We also have this mystery bag, which is written Gone Bananas on it. You got your choice. Now, if the members want to join in and do a little audience participation at this point on this, go ahead.
Sounds like you could have a good weekend in downtown Vancouver with that prize pack.
Well, that's great. So I actually needed to get a new headlamp, so I'll go with what I've seen, and I'll go with the what you showed me.
Okay. So the SISKA delivery service will get it to you eventually. Depends on if Rob's bicycle works or if I have to go deliver it myself.
Roger, what's
sounds
in the
great.
bag?
Yeah, are
Thank
you
you
gonna
very
tell us
much.
what's in the bag?
No,
Oh,
I don't
I'd
want
love
to
tell you
know.
what's in the bag.
Oh, that would be telling.
Yeah.
So Daryl, can you send your,
I can send a note to him, Alan. I can send a note to him.
okay, great. Oh, that's great.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Debbie and Roger. Who knew that Roger was so good at shopping and gift giving? It's really a skill I didn't know he had, but he shines when he gets a prize in his hands.
No, actually, you must give Deb Leach 100% credit on this because we needed an expert shopper and Deb is it.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Not
Well
easy.
done, Deb.
Okay.
All right. So thank you both. And now, so Fred, did you want to say something to introduce Morley?
No, you can do it.
Okay, well, let me try then, because I've paddled with Morley for on a number of trips. So I know he is not just a keen archaeologist. This guy lives archaeology. I mean, if there is something in the area, he kind of sniffs it out and he can't stop himself. He's got to go and check it out. And he really doesn't understand if somebody who's on the trip is not equally excited about the 15th fish trap weir that day, because my God, they're all different. They're all part of history, and it's quite true. And it's so lovely to see somebody who is so passionate about what they love to do, archaeology. And so Morley has a wonderful job. He's president of Millennia Research. He does archaeology all over the province. He's frequently called upon by First Nations and the government to assess things that come to light. And what an amazing job. So naturally, when there was interest in knowing something about Aboriginal archaeology, Fred thought of Morley. And so we'll turn it over to Morley, our paddling archaeologist. Go ahead, Morley, over to you.
Okay, I will share my screen. Hopefully that's going to work. Are people seeing that? Are you hearing me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. I'm also known as Galaxy Note 9 or something as well. If you want to see my face video from my phone thing here, but it didn't come across with my regular name. So yes, I'm the tame archaeologist or something like that for SISKA, I guess. I've been paddling for 10 years now and doing archaeology for 52, I think it is. So I have more experience doing archaeology, but certainly have fun doing both. Yeah, so I was going to talk today about the different kinds of archaeological remains that are out where we either paddle or camp or go for walks, and both what to look for so you know what, have an idea of what you're seeing and the fact that it could be archaeological in nature, as well as a few ideas of what not to do, which fits in very well with the sort of the leave no trace ideas from the Marine Trails presentation. If this works, here we go. So the things you might see paddling, village or camp remains, especially shell middens. We'll talk a little bit more about that. A little bit smaller camp remains with house platforms and ridges of midden between houses. Fish traps, they're all different. Stone wall ones, wooden stake weir ones. I'll show you some examples of both. Refuges or fortification sites. So there's a couple of different types of those, really. Middens, they're up on pinnacles. There's one that I saw in Haida Gwaii that is up on top of a sea stack. It's actually right on the outer coast on top of a sea stack, and there's midden on the top of the thing. It's absolutely crazy. And things called trench embankments. Forest use sites, culturally modified trees. I spent a great deal of my professional life looking at those. And in the old days, figuring out what they were and how to record them properly, and what we could do to mitigate some of the damage from logging. Burial sites, caves, bones washing out onto a beach, cairns and mound features, and then just artifacts lying about. So shell middens are the common thing that we see right on the shoreline. There's a photo or a drawing from 1850s or early 1860s, can't remember which expedition that went across land, Vancouver Island, came down Nidinat Lake and stayed at Waiaak at the mouth of Nidinat Lake at Nidinat Narrows. The Narrows is just behind the bluff in the background here. This is an interesting site because it was both a shell midden and a refuge site, and the refuge and fortified site is up on this rocky part of the site, fronted by a surf beach on the other side, and they had a few mounted cannons up there for a while after the historic period started. On the left, you'll see a picture. I think this might be Piers Island, if memory serves. That is a typical shell midden, about 20-30 centimeters deep, with layers of shell and dark soil in it that's rapidly eroding. We have rising sea levels. Global warming is causing sea levels to rise all over the place. We also have some tectonic action going on here. And the other thing, which isn't considered a lot of the time, is the greatly increased wave energy that's hitting the shorelines on protected areas now. Not from kayaks, but from power boats and larger commercial traffic. a lot more waves than there used to be in sheltered areas, and that really hammers archaeological sites. Shell middens are here. We've got layers of ash and dark soil. If you dig in this sediments, you get really black really fast. Deep layers of shell. This one is almost complete shell, probably from processing, and then other layers where the shell is more fragmented and crushed, and probably more of a floor area. Various boiling stones in there from people cooking before they had metal pot or clay pots. But just absolutely full of interesting, to archaeologists at least, things in them. Because these are the things that we interact with probably the most, don't dig or scratch in eroding midden banks. It's ethically bad, plus it's illegal. Of course, it doesn't match the leave no trace and type ethic anyway. If you have to clip vegetation from an archaeological point of view, that's probably fine. The middens are, after all, they are places where people have lived and camped, often for thousands of years. It's camping that built up these middens in the first place. Most middens are, they aggregate, they build up through time. So it's not, the erosion is usually from water or from too many people walking the same trail. So that's another kind of thing that links with the marine trails of not causing erosion. So not only for the environment, but also the archaeology. Excavating platforms on the beach is usually just fine. If you come to an area where there's no place to camp on the uplands, you are camping intertidal, you've got to go up high. It's a shingle beach or sand, and you need a place to put your tent. I think probably many of us at least have made little scraped platforms. If you're in the intertidal, should be no issue. Excavating on land is a no-no. We did find sort of guerrilla tent platforms when we were on Tricket Island on the Central Coast a few years ago, very close to the 12,000-year-old, probably the oldest habitation site in BC known. Similar to the last presentation, only move wood. I say if it's clear it's a recently fallen tree. Don't collect artifacts. If you see something you think is something, take a photo. Everybody's got a phone these days. Take a photo, waypoint it either with a phone or with a GPS. Don't handle any bones you see sticking out of the wall. If you think they might be human, take a photo again, or several photos and a GPS point, and someone can come out and check it out later. Here's a site on the Central Coast. I believe this one was where there was just an old fallen shack that was on a place that had fairly deep shell midden. On the top of the shell midden, you can see some sort of linear patterning here in the moss. That's an old collapsed roof building. There was a larger post here that had a notched top in it, suggesting it had sort of elements of Aboriginal architecture. It was probably an early 20th century shack from when populations were crashing amongst the First Nations. They were amalgamating in larger villages and coming back to traditional village sites for harvesting particular resources and staying and camping for a little while. This is the kind of thing that's there. There we go. There we go. Fish traps. You can see this is obviously a human-made structure. The stones here you'll see on the beach, there's no natural stones of this size on this beach. People have carried them either from the top here. They're pretty rounded, so perhaps other places, but they've built this perhaps 60, 70 meter long wall of 1 or 2 courses high stone that was probably some type of fish trap. You can see another wall in the background here that loops around the next creek. This area of Gale Passage, there were dozens of fish traps in there, and everybody I think was quite bored, but me by the end of a day or two walking around looking at these things. Here's another one with couple of our members there. And we also have clam garden walls, which are constructed walls, very similar to fish trap sites, but they're designed to capture sediments and improve the environment for clam species in particular. This one, you could see the sediments are pretty much the same on both sides of the wall. So likely this one is more likely a fish trap that's silted in rather, or sort of graveled in, sedimented in, rather than a clam garden wall. But we also find wood stake ones. This is on the left is a wooden stake pounded into some sort of silty sand, some shell around it, a little bit of shell midden in there as well. That's actually very close to the Alex Fraser Bridge in Vancouver on the Fraser River. And that wooden stake and thousands of others in there are about 4,500 years old. They're the oldest ones known on the BC coast still, as far as I know. And this is, I think, Comox Harbor. And Comox Harbor, the upper end of it, is full of tens of thousands of wooden stakes that crisscross and form heart-shaped patterns and things of a large complex of quite intricate fish traps that were built there over hundreds of years. Wooden fish traps are very cool because the wood does preserve. You can take a little sliver of it, get radiocarbon dates, and figure out just how old these traps are and how long they were used for. But you don't necessarily have to find the wood stakes in Smooth Beach. This is some up by Hot Springs Cove that we found a couple of years ago. Alan Campbell and I can't remember who had some trail flagging tape with us. And I said, well, I spotted one of these things and then another, and then like, okay, well, let's start flagging these things so we can see if there's a pattern here or not. And in fact, there was several dozen pounded into these quite a rocky place, which you normally wouldn't think of for a wooden fish trap, but in fact that this is where it was, at the top of a pool though, and probably a very good salmon fishing spot. And I made a map, took photos, and then we took the flagging off and went on our way. Obviously, again, try not to move rocks, don't pull up stakes to look at tool marks, don't collect washed out ones. And not only is bad ethics, but it's actually illegal without a permit to do any of those things. This is really cool. Canoe runs. Speaking of kayak runs and canoe runs are built where there's too many rocks to make it a convenient canoe landing. People moved the rocks, put them into piles, linear piles, and then launched and landed the canoes in the smoother parts in between. You can see through time some rocks have fallen back into the gaps here, but the Moore Islands is stuck way out in Hecate Strait. It's a very remote spot. I don't think even too many paddlers ever get there because it's a pretty long crossing to get there from Aristizabal or some of the other Campania, I think, islands that are not too far away. But we knew it we were working for the First Nation in this case, and we knew there was petroglyphs recorded on this island, and we went and we found the petroglyphs that had been previously recorded and found those again, no problem. But we also knew there was supposed to be a village, and the village wasn't where the petroglyphs were. That was where First Nations still go to camp when they are camping on land there. But we knew there was supposed to be a village. So we spent a couple of days trying to find it. And on the second day on this sort of weird back channel, only had a surf kind of rock gardening entrances both sides. We found this whole complex of canoe landing spots, canoe runs. So quite neat. Again, if you're in these spots, just be this is a canoe run, but because of all the driftwood on it, it's a bit hard to see. So right in between there's a pile of rock here and another pile of rock here. In between is a canoe run. So sort of be aware, walk lightly. Refuges, or fortifications. On the Salish Sea in particular, people built a lot of these trench embankments. They had a village or at least a series of shelters, and had a nearby proper village. When enemies were known to be about, they would retreat to these sort of strongholds. They usually are on a point of land with steep drop off into the ocean all around them. And on the sort of the vulnerable side, they dig a big deep trench. There's one down by Finlayson Point. You can still see the grass is greener in the bottom of the ditch there. This one, I think, is on one of the D&D properties. It might be Albert Head. There's one that I know I've taken some SISKA paddle people to that's quite easy to see, that's right on Towner Point by which lagoon is it? It's not Albert Head Lagoon, it's the next one west.
Tower Point at Whitty's Lagoon.
Whitty's Lagoon, thanks. This is another fairly well-known refuge site, Execution Rock, that's near Bamfield. Big high prominence of rock. There's shell midden all over the top of it. There were structures up there, and then over this little neck of land and around onto the beach, this is where the village site was. The village is Keehin, and it's been nominated to be a World Heritage Site. If you want to go there, one of the Huhayat band members, Stella Peters, does guided tours. I want to set up with her once COVID's over, a trip out here and kayak from Bamfield around and come in by ocean to this site, because I don't think many people do that anymore. It's a pretty mild but a potential surf landing. But of course, a whole village lived here. People went in and out by canoe pretty much every day that when it wasn't too rough. Oh yeah, we found that one at, I think it's called Green Point, up on the New Chatlets, that's not well known. Keehin is cool in that it has standing house posts and beams. Here's one of the bigger posts that's left. You can see decorative fluting done by an adze at the top of it. There's a large post on the side here, another one going from, or a beam down there, another beam that runs off this post down this way. A lot of the beams are heavily overgrown by spruce and hemlock trees, and they kind of wrap themselves around, and the roots spread out down the beams, but they're quite neat spots. Forest use sites, generally culturally modified trees. Here's Alan Campbell, the long-suffering Alan Campbell, going on a few rambles with me in the bush. These are taper bark stripped trees. People took the bark off the tree in the spring and early summer when the sap's running, and they took long tapering strips and discarded the outer bark right there, and took the inner bark, folded it up, put it in bundles, packed it out of the bush, and then later used it to cut strips to make baskets, clothing, pounded it and fluffed it to make fiber that was used again in clothing, spun with dog wool or spun with mountain goat wool or feathers to make a warm cape. Used for babies' diapers, all kinds of things they could be used for. The heavier, tougher bark could be spun into rope. Just endless uses for the bark, and also all kinds of other parts of the cedar tree. Here we are at Cougar Annie's at Heshquit, going on the walks around there. It's absolutely full of culturally modified trees, lots of them Aboriginally logged. So Aboriginally logged is logged, but not commercially, but in a traditional manner. The way people logged on the west coast of the island was to generally cut very, very high stumps, and nursing trees grow on the top of these stumps. And you see the big nursing tree here, and it's enveloping and wrapping around this very high stump. There's another one in the background over there. One of the better canoes I've ever seen in the bush. This one would have probably been a very fast, seaworthy fur seal hunting canoe. If it hadn't had a fatal flaw up the bow here, and there was a big chunk out of it, and it looked like probably the builder decided it was too big a flaw to fix, and they went on to make another one. Left this one. First, the seal hunting canoes were made almost commercially for a while in the mid and late 19th century, as particularly west coast of Vancouver Island villages had their men go out on sealing schooners that went up to the Bering Sea, the Aleutians, the Pribilofs, over to Kamchatka, and even down to the northern Japanese islands. And occasionally entire villages had all the men lost because the schooner sank. But it was profitable enough. Some of the First Nations men, when they came back, the ones that saved their money actually ended up buying schooners or having schooners built for them and had their own crews and went out. It could be very profitable. One of the few things they could actually do for money. This is quite a remarkable tree painting. This is actually from the Kispioks. So it's more interior, but there are occasionally tree paintings and carvings are occasionally found on the coast. This one I dated to the 1820s, and it's almost like a pictograph. It's a human figure. The legs are kind of faded out. They've almost disappeared. Believe the paint used was a mixture of charcoal and probably a deer fat or something like that, or fish oils. A rectangular body, indications of ribs and a vertebral column here, probably a labret in a lip ornament on the mouth here. A couple of big eyes and tear lines coming down from the inside of the eyes. Really interesting thing to have really in the middle of nowhere. Very cool. One of my other favorite types of CMTs defined is plank strip tree. Before people had ubiquitous metal tools and actually European logging techniques, it was often, unless you were going to make a canoe or need a whole log for something, often it was easier to find a big tree and just take planks off it while it was still standing. And so here they've chopped up high. They've made notches at the top, notched at the bottom, and then they would have split the wood and taken planks off the standing tree on sort of two 90-degree sides. This one we dated to 1792, I think it was. So just about the time of contact. This is another one. This was from the last couple of years. This is not a plank strip tree, but it's a kindling tree. Not really exciting as far as a cool thing to find, but I still think they're fascinating. On the left side here, I put an illustration in of someone using a stone hammer and driving the wedges. So this is how those planks would have been split off the standing tree, except you would have had to climb 10 meters up the tree to start these things. But also, in addition to taking whole planks off, you could also take smaller pieces of wood off when you needed kindling. Anybody that's tried to get a fire going when it's really raining hard knows it's really, really difficult to get that fire sparking and started. Once it's going, it's easier to keep going. And one of the best places to find dry wood is on the dry side of a leaning cedar tree. And this one is such a tree, and you'll notice it's all kind of shattered looking up on the face of it. And it's shattered from the bottom up, which is not typical of natural damage and just normal tree decay. So you start looking at that, and if you look, you'll see a line here and a very similar looking line there, and another one here, another one up there, another one over there. In fact, they're kind of all over the tree. And what that is the scars from people driving in these wedges with a stone hammer. And it's scored the wood across the back of the sort of the cut. Here's a bit of a close-up of one of those wedge marks, and you can clearly see the top and the bottom of the wedge, and it kind of chatters or shudders along as it gets driven. Every hammer blow would leave another of these little short marks. And here's the stone hammers on the sides. But these things are actually fairly common once you start looking for them, but most people would not think to look. Here's a big rectangular strip tree up on the central coast. We don't find these typically on southern or western Vancouver Island. They're only the central and northern coast. Not much to say about them other than, not taking dead cedar from one of these things. It's against the ethical rules anyway. But I'm a little bit different, especially when you're in an area that is not heavily used, in an area that just has a few visitors every year. One of the joys of going out is to go out and see the forest, particularly old growth cedar forest. There's so little of it left. It's kind of scary how little is left. But if there's old growth cedar with decent sized trees anywhere near the ocean, it's probably absolutely jam-packed with culturally modified trees. As European background and environmentalists, they tend to think of the forest is pristine and it's untouched by humans, and it's thousands of years old. And really, we shouldn't go there because we need to leave it for the animals and the birds and that. In fact, the forests of the coast have been used very heavily by people for tens of thousands of years, and people have gone in and harvested the bark and the wood, and we can find the evidence of that. And of course, this is very important for land claims work. But I just love going out into a bit of old growth and just seeing how long it takes me to find some culturally modified trees. And people were all over the forest at pretty regular intervals. There was a lot more people walking in the bush 300 years ago than I would think are walking in the bush now. Of course, you have to be, particularly as we're elderly and out on our own and far from help, you really have to take your time walking through this stuff if you do go off trail. But a lot of this you can find right off the sides of well-worn trails too. So one of the things we get on the south coast, and kind of fits in with the Douglas fir MM slide that from the previous presentation, is Doug fir culturally modified trees. Douglas fir, the bark especially, but also the wood, is absolutely fabulous firewood. The amount of energy that's released from burning Douglas fir is almost an order of magnitude greater than a lot of the other woods that are available. And Douglas fir bark in particular is really great stuff. It's light. It packs a huge amount of heat in it. And of course, it's easy to carry and all that kind of stuff, and it was available. On the left, you'll see this is a photo by my friend Pete Dady, I think, or at any rate, it's an old growth Doug fir, really thick bark, probably 10 or 20 centimeter thick bark. But you can see all these smooth parts of the bark. And Douglas fir is really kind of a bizarre tree in that, unlike cedar, where you strip it and the face stays the same after you've stripped it, and in fact starts to rot away after a while, Douglas fir regenerates bark over the scar. And so this is sort of newer, younger bark that's grown over the top of the old scar and filled in between the old growth bark that's up high. And I believe all the little lines here are pointing to wedge marks. And I think this is a wedge mark here that they've highlighted with the rulers to see there. Oh, and there's another, you can see some sort of scoring lines over here. So this is something you'll find where there's old growth Doug fir. In fact, you can see some of these in some of our paddles that we do around Albert Head and Rocky Point. Pictographs and petroglyphs. Pictographs are the paintings, petroglyphs are the carvings. These sometimes get defaced by graffiti. You can see, I believe that's Michael there taking photos there. And this is a rock face that Lynn spotted, I think, and she spotted that there was some faint orangey red underneath this orange sort of hole in the wall. And there's the hole. There's some very faint red. You can see some sort of staining. When I took photos of it and then processed it with some software that's specialized for pictographs, you can see the painting much clearer. It's also got some either running of the paint or possibly some a species of lichen that has the same pigment as the paint that's gone down here. But you'll see a very, very clear circular eye. And I think that's what caught Lynn's eye first. There's another one that's you can barely see anymore that's on here. And of course, the rest of it is kind of like a big smiley face. And just a different type of filter that the software runs, just to show it a little bit different way. But quite neat. Another one from the North Coast with some faces on a rock wall. And the petroglyphs, this one's Aldridge Point. I think most people have seen this either hiking or during a paddle. These get defaced quite often with graffiti. The graffiti tends to wear away, and the older actual carving is much deeper, and it stays longer. So, excuse me, that's why they're here still. This one, I believe, is a sea lion, and these are the folds of sort of fat on its neck. And more sort of mythical creature, sort of sea monster, dragon type things from Gabriola Island. And there's very similar ones at Petroglyph Park and up on some of the interior lakes. Dan Lean did some interesting research decades ago and found and mapped a lot of the sites, rock art sites throughout the Salish Sea. And very interesting pattern showed up. The yellow dots are petroglyphs, the carvings. The red dots are the red paintings, usually ochre. And you'll see the paintings tend to be on inland parts of the fjords, the inlets, and up on inland lakes, whereas the paintings are almost all on sort of ocean shorelines. More exposed spots. So both are associated with people seeking spirit power in the old days. Burials. Greater Victoria used to be full of tens, perhaps hundreds of thousands of cairns at one point from all the people that had lived here that died over several hundred years where their burials were marked with cairns. Uplands is full of them. You'll see this one's very clear. These are all Darcy Matthews photos. He's a prophet at UVic now. He's cleared the vegetation and moss off so you can see the rock more easily for these photos. This is from his master's or PhD work. Here's one. This one's at Rocky Point. Several meters. I think this one is about 3 by 5 meters. It's bigger size and it has a cairn in it. And different types of them, different sizes, shapes. All over the place. Some are much more elaborate ditch and mound features where people dug a circular ditch and piled all the earth into a mound in the middle. There's usually cairns in the middle, and usually a very high status person like a chief would be buried in the center of one of these things. Another shot of it there. This one's about 5 or 6 meters across, I think. And burial caves are the other thing, of course, that many of you have seen. Please don't go in them. First Nations do not like photographs being taken of the human remains or anybody going there. If you think it might not be known about, you want to report it. Again, take the GPS and maybe a couple of photos, but please don't put them on, public media and that kind of thing. With cairns around, don't move rocks for tent pad clearing or for waiting a stakeout if it's windy. At least before you look about and think about it. Over on Darcy Island here, where we camp, just behind the main camp, there's a number of cairns in there, and some of them are really hard to recognize. And some of them were, in fact, disturbed by people moving the rocks. to help hold their tent down in storms and that kind of thing. So it's very easy to not do the right thing sometimes, without sometimes quite innocently. And no matter how tempting, don't pick up artifacts and take them out with you if you find one. Some very cool antler, slate, chipstone, agate, chipstone points from around here. Take a photo, take a GPS waypoint, send it to me or someone else, and check it out. And part of the stick is up to 2 years and $1 million fine as an individual for contravening the Heritage Conservation Act. It's very rarely implemented, but certainly the stick is there. So they'll take nothing but photos is a good plan. Some more artifacts, a little miniature club from right near the Royal Roads, the lagoon down here. A little club, a tiny little the artifacts from that same area years ago that have wooden.
Morley, you're fading out on us, I'm afraid.
These things harvested the
Morley, I'm not sure if you're not speaking as loudly, but we can't hear you very well.
Cutting out quite badly.
I think he's maybe gone. Oh, no, there he is. Galaxy Note 9.
I sent him a text.
Okay. Is his voice coming across on his phone?
try this. Might have been muted on my phone.
Hey, here you are.
My headset, my computer, main computer here, and that just died. It's trying to reconnect. So my phone apparently is still working. So that was the last slide. Luckily, but I don't know if you heard anything about those wooden wedges were the same things that made those marks on the trees. So with the rope grommets on the top and cool stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, we missed that part, but we saw the images.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you, Morley. Does anybody have a question for Morley, since we don't have his presentation in front of us, but he's there?
I would be interested to know where the canoe was.
I think it's called White Pine Cove or White Bark Cove, White Pine Cove, I think, in Clayoquot Sound.
Okay. That was very interesting. It reminded me of one in Haida Gwaii.
Morley, I've got a question. Can you talk a little bit about the ethics around camping near sites and the different sites? Are there different rules?
Burial sites are usually, the First Nations do not want people going near burial sites for any reason. Midden sites, I think it depends on the First Nation group, how much concern they have. Certainly camping, if you're doing it low impact, leave no trace, there should be no impact to the site. As I say, the sites were created by people camping there. They tend to build up through time, not disappear. and most of the sites, if they haven't been lived in for a while, have a top layer of soil that's accumulated since the site was last lived in, that provides a bit of a vertical buffer between your camping and the shell midden. Sometimes, particularly on drier sites around the Gulf Islands and that, you're camping right pretty much on the midden. So, there are going to be some areas where there could be some impact and might want to move the camping area aside. But generally, if it's particularly when you get away from our warm and gentle Salish Sea here into the more remote parts of the coast and the west coast, if it's a good place to camp now, you can almost guarantee that there's going to be archaeological remains there. So it's very hard to find a place with no potential conflict.
I'm curious if you've experienced or seen any conflict between like real estate interests and some of the fortifications or were they always so excessively inhospitable to that they wouldn't be of commercial value and there'd be a conflict between archaeological interests and real estate interests?
Oh yeah, lots of them have been built over. There was a fabulous one on Pender Island, right by the canal that divides north and south there. Just on the South Pender side, there was a ditch feature that cut off a little peninsula there, and it was a very clear, you could see it was like a triple ditch, and it was a serpentine path to get in, and they must have had palisades on each of them and sort of had a multiple defense thing there. And there was little bits of midden on the inside of that, and someone built a giant house there, and they were able to get permission to fill over the trench embankment to make a driveway.
Wow.
So yeah. That was 30 years ago, but it probably wouldn't happen now, but I wouldn't say it couldn't happen now.
Yeah.
Certainly we had Grace Islet not long ago with the burial cairns and the house being initially approved to get built over the top of them.
Can I ask how much warfare took place? And this is before contact, I assume. And did that lessen or increase after contact with settlers?
Well, not so much settlers, but the early traders. There was a lot of warfare. There's some of the earliest skeletal finds, like Kennewick down on the Columbia River, has embedded stone points in the vertebrae in the poor guy. So warfare goes way back, as far almost as we have archaeological evidence, but it really seems to have been picked up about AD 1000. You get some older forts before that, but the number of forts really rapidly increases about AD 1000. And it seems like there was just generally a lot, for whatever reason, a lot more warfare happening then. The warfare did increase even further at contact, because of course the traders came in, and particularly the Americans were keen to trade guns for furs. And that meant that some groups had almost exclusive access to firearms early, and their neighbors paid the price for that by and large. And the Coagulth in particular had a lot of wars both within them and sort of domino effect. It's interesting that place names are Salish right up through about halfway up Johnson Strait. You get things like Cusham, which is both the name of a village site that's near Port McNeill, and there's also a Cusham. There's a running race that goes up and over the mountain and down, sort of a mudfest race every year, and that's the Salish word for soap berries. And it's a Salish word, but it's right in the middle of what's now Kwakwaka'wakw territory. So they, in the early historic period, the Kwaggle people pushed far to the south, right down through into the Comox area, basically. And yeah, warfare was seems to have been pretty endemic. All the first ship logs talk about, hey, will you help us defeat our enemies, kind of thing. In the logs that you know, in their first interactions with people. So yeah, a lot of warfare happening early, and then there was a fairly big gap over most of the coast when populations were dropping from introduced diseases, but there wasn't really a lot of settlement yet. There, I think even by 1900 or 1905, there was, I think, 5 settlers on Haida Gwaii. It was a tiny number. So commercial fishing and logging and all those things that we kind of associate Haida Gwaii, or you know, the old Queen Charlotte Islands with, was really just an early 20th century phenomenon. So a lot of the coast was pretty much, the First Nations were left largely on their own until well into the late 19th and even early 20th centuries.
Were they hunter-gatherers entirely, or did they practice any agriculture?
Mostly hunter-gatherer fishers, you know, fishing in, you know, the sea, the tide goes out and the table is laid, as was saying in a lot of places. But there was certainly horticulture in the Gulf Islands, San Juans, Victoria kind of area with camas. There were some other sort of root crops that were tended and managed to the point that essentially it's kind of agriculture. But those crops did become quite large and profitable. And in fact, you know, Salish people traded large amounts of camas to New Chalmers and Dididat people up the west coast where it didn't grow. So it was a sort of a semi-commercial, harvested, traded commodity, even in the early times, but not agriculture per se, but really close to it. Very, very intensive management of different ecosystems and resources.
So fascinating.
It really is. You know, I have to say, having had the privilege really of traveling with Morley and watching his excitement as he sees these things, is it adds a great deal to your tripping experience, to your understanding of the society we have and where it came from. But we could go on for a long time, I suspect, but I suspect maybe this is a good time to stop. I think, Fred, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, Morley, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. You obviously put a lot of thought and a lot of time in putting it together. And I learned a bunch tonight, and I'm sure everybody else did. So in case you don't have too many of these, oops, they disappear.
Yeah, they do.
Doesn't work. It's our much coveted mug.
Oh.
So would you
awesome.
like another one?
I don't have one of those, you know, I don't think, no.
Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah, perfect.
Our calendar. Morley bought 4 last year, and the year before that, and the year before that. So I was taking a prize for that too. So
I thought I was going to get whatever was in the bag. So
I think you'll have to talk to Roger about that. I wanted to mention next month's presentation. It's the same day, the 24th of March, and it's Joshua McInnes, and he's going to talk to us on transient orcas.
Ooh.
Start practicing your orca calls. And back to you, Alan.
Okay. Okay. Oh, thanks, Fred. And thank you, Morley, and everybody else. That was a great group effort. I think there's a lot more you can learn. Obviously, these are just kind of beginning to tempt you into the world of archaeology on the coast of British Columbia. But thank you so much, Morley. Thanks, everybody. We'll call it a night. And don't forget to get out there paddling.
Alan, do you think we could ask if Morley could provide any recommendations in terms of resources and post them?
Oh yeah,
somewhere?
books. Morley, do you have any that you could say? And then if you have any more, you could forward them to me. I can flip them out to everybody if you want.
Okay. Some of the best ones that combine archaeology and First Nations contemporary information in that are Hilary Stewart's books on. There's one on indigenous fishing, or she might have called it Indian fishing at the time. There's another one on artifacts, and she wrote a whole book just on cedar. And at least some of those I think are still in press, and they're great. Just to turn the pages and look, and they pack a tremendous amount of information.
Thank you.
In those ones.
Yeah, Morley, I was thinking when we were in Nootka, I got inspired by you and came back and read the John Jewett. Is that the right name?
Yes.
The story of the fellow who was kidnapped by the chief there and then was given his freedom. That's amazing. And he recorded in ways that we might understand better kind of the life of the times there.
Yeah, very fabulous story. Yeah, highly recommend reading that. And yeah, he was held as a slave essentially, but a slave with privileges because of his skills and because he was a sort of exotic for the time. And he underwent a lot of things that he just didn't understand, but we understand now, knowing more about traditional First Nations culture. He obviously went through a ritual training and spirit power process, and he didn't have a clue that that's what was going on at the time. He just thought people were being really strange and making him do these horrible, hard things, and it had no understanding of the cultural meaning of it at all.
Wow.
Okay, well, thank you again. And if you have any more ideas, we'll send them out. It is quite fascinating. You might get hooked. You might become a kind of an amateur archaeologist and join Morley's tribe.
Oh,
Thank you.
Morley, such
Thanks,
an inspiration.
That's great. Lots more things for the heads and tails quiz at Christmas too.
Ooh.
Okay, good night, everybody. Thank you again.
Thank you again. That was
Night.
wonderful. Good night.
Super.
Good night.
John Jewett.